Yep, we'll start. Fill in. Well, it is weird. I know we talked about it, but it is weird because it's on Wednesday.
Village calendar.
Seems written.
He probably just ran to the church right now to get his car.
Get that new car. Yeah, but he doesn't park it at his house.
He parks it at the church.
Parks it across the street.
It's because they can't both get in and out.
Yeah. Is he talking about putting something in the back?
Yeah, he can't. I mean, he can, but
Well, he needs to put a barn back there in the very back.
I said, if you put it back there,
We just got rid of the carport.
yeah, that's his storage area. It's not a carport.
I told you, I said, put a gravel pad in the back and a carport. And it would fit in. All right. We'll go ahead and call to order the Planning and Zoning Commission meeting for Wednesday, December 1st, 2021. Go ahead with the roll call.
Chairman Green,
Here.
Ron Dane.
Here.
Jesse Koppel. Ron Merriman
Here.
and Lee.
Here. All right, we'll go with the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, we'll move on to public comment on matters not on tonight's agenda. So if you have anything that is not on here tonight, like to say something, please come up. And hearing no public comment, we'll go ahead and close the public comment. And we don't have meeting minutes.
Quick turnaround. I didn't get them.
Okay. I just noticed that. So,
Yeah.
All right. So we'll move on to application Z-21-204, the conditional use of 276 South Main Street. Bailey or Jim, if you'd like to give us the background, and then we'll have our applicant come up.
This is a conditional use application for 276 South Main Street. The property in question is actually 5 parcels. I'll show you a map, a quick map. So there's 3 parcels along South Main Street, and then there's 2 parcels kind of in the back. The addressing here is weird because what I think happened is that it was one large parcel, and over the years it got split into smaller parcels. So 276 it holds for multiple parcels, and then 292 also is an address on both the building on the corner of 37 and Douglas, as well as the church. So this application is for 276 through 292. The applicant on the website can only apply for one address, but the applicant would like to hold the use through the 3 properties, the 3 front properties. The applicant is requesting a conditional use to operate an event space in the 3 properties, using the church and the foundation hall as event space, and then the home as sort of a supporting space. So if you wanted to do catering or something like that, or getting ready for an event, that's what the home would be used for. It is currently, all 5 properties are currently owned by Church of Youth for Christ. And the applicant has an agreement with Church of Youth for Christ that if the conditional use is approved, then he would take control of those 5 properties. and Church of Youth for Christ, he would allow Church of Youth for Christ to still use those during the week for their gathering purposes. I don't have anything else really to add. The applicant is here. Mr. Malone, if you'd like to come up to the podium, and the commission members may ask you some questions.
All right, if you'd like to give us some background on the project that Bailey hasn't yet.
I've had a family connection to this building. I've had my dad seeing it in the current state for the last 15 years. It's pretty much what happens. And we wanted to do something with it. We had the idea of, well, the last 100 years, people got married in it. So gorgeous space. I brought a couple pictures with me. I'll hand out if you want to see it. But it's a gorgeous space. And it would work very well as a event and wedding venue, and big use, and we'd like to see it used before it gets to the point where the decay would get to the point where demolition was the other option.
Okay. What questions does the board have?
He covers that.
So first of all, I'm very interested to hear any neighboring parcel feedback. I know that's upcoming, but I am wanting to hear some of that because this it's been a very unique situation for me to think through because it's a piece of property that's been used in a special use type circumstance as a church. So it's seeing large gatherings on a semi-consistent basis. There's parking in the back that isn't up to code with respect to drainage or paving or anything like that, but there is parking in the back to be able to be used. Bailey pointed out the address and the assignment for the address. A lot of uniqueness assigned to this piece of property, not the least of which is the fact that it's currently zoned residential. You are one, right? Future land use map has it assigned for residential. So what's being considered tonight with respect to UR1 that I can see is a conditional use request for a conditional use that isn't explicitly listed in UR1 as applicable. So that in and of itself is outside of the norm, but can be addressed. It also lends itself to the comprehensive plan with respect to the city identity. A 100-year-old building, right? 100-year-old church that's been in that location for its entire existence. And so there's a certain identity that's applied to it. So the preservation piece of it is important, however it's preserved or however it's used. But for me, what is being considered is almost setting a precedence for this type of request in a residential space moving forward. And that's what I'm struggling with. So what I'll outline are just some of the concerns that I have, just to start with, and then some of what I think are good points. Because of its unique situation within a residential area, if this were to move forward, I would not support outside events. I know in the narrative that you provided, you talked about tenting and things like that for outside events, possibly like outside weddings and things like that. I don't know. I don't know if I could support something like that as a condition to this application. The sign itself, too, we've had a lot of discussions about signs. I think there's a consideration for sign conformity with respect to like internal illumination for that sign. So I would want to talk through that, get some feedback from the rest of commission on, downlighting or something that's more conforming, because this isn't going to be used in a public space sense that a church use would. It's more akin to a business, right? But not even a home-based business. So it's unique all around in that respect. We talked about the residence that's there right now. Would, under your current plan, would that cease to be a residence and that would incorporate within the overall functionality of the event space?
Decided to expand over that address. But we do not plan on using that structure as.
So taking the business consideration, a GCC type application to this request, which it shares some similarities in, I would not support including the residential aspect in the overall of this application, because if you look at how businesses are approved within the village, you can operate businesses out of accessory units, but you can't have one of the accessory units be a dwelling. So if it were to cease being a dwelling, then I think it could be considered, but in so long as it's a dwelling, I would not include that residence, that physical parcel as a part of this application.
The only reason as it's started out, as you mentioned, the home and the church share an address of 2 seconds.
Sure.
So
I think we could denote that down to a parcel listing instead of just an address with, if this were to move forward from an approval type perspective. In my opinion, that would be my opinion, but I would not include that residence until it ceases to be a residence. Just that if it were to be incorporated into an overall plan, that it come back to the board for review, because there's even somewhat of a buffer that would need to be considered at that point, because you're,
kind of like if we were to do anything with that home.
okay,
So just that would be our next step of what I'm thinking.
sure.
We would like to raise it.
That's fair. When you go down the list of conditional use criteria in 113103, there's a lot in here that are true statements that would be in favor of what you are asking for. It talks about in 13103E, conditions or operations be detrimental to any person's property, to general welfare by reasons of excessive production of traffic noise, smoke, fumes, glare, and odors. We have a noise ordinance on the book, so if anything got out of hand, I'm sure that could be invoked and enforced. That's another reason why I wouldn't be supportive of any outside type of event handling in the space because of its proximity to residential. But that would be a concern that I would have. I think if it were to stay a church, the traffic would probably be pretty similar to what an event space might lend itself to being. Item J is a conditional use identified for the applicable zoning district. And that's where, for me, the biggest piece falls short, is that it's not specifically identified unless you consider an event space a public building. And that would be the determination of the commission to set that precedence moving forward. If this were to come up in any other capacity, in any other request. But I think the important piece to consider is that outside of that very important small piece, is that the rest of the infrastructure is essentially there that you wouldn't find in a home parcel in the middle of a development that would come with a similar request, right? You've got parking, you've got space, you have infrastructure already there in a large enough capacity that you wouldn't have in a normal type home. I'm just hung up on its proximity to residential, and what that does and the precedence that this would set with moving forward. But I appreciate the vision bringing to that space and wanting to bring it up, and the passion that you have and the tie that you have to it emotionally to want to bring it up to a better and higher use, because that I think is ultimately the intent of the zoning code, is highest and best use. And I think this would definitely approach that. It's just the precedence that it sets moving forward, which I think bears further consideration. And I'm interested to hear what the neighbors have to say about it.
Ron, do you have anything on this?
I love the idea of reusing the church, an old building, and just, you know, taking a building instead of just raising and building something new, to reuse the part for a similar use for what it was historically. Bailey, just a question. You said the front 3 properties are what we're considering, not all 5.
Yes. The back properties don't have addresses.
One does.
So
doesn't it?
so there
Yeah.
are 3 properties that have the address of 276.
Yeah.
My concern would be with an event space, and I think with the zoning, we would not have the parking without including those.
Yeah.
What's
Understand.
your intention with the
Your own
back 2
children.
properties?
So the original intention was to,
All 5 together.
but I agree with what he said with the home.
And doing the other 4.
Yeah, as long as the structure is there, it will be.
Hey, Ron, we could assign a separate address. That's not a problem too.
Well, there's some issues with the utilities being set up for the church.
So, yeah, so the church building and the home share a water. tank. Yeah, so.
Which we wouldn't allow anymore, but it's
I don't know how we-
existing.
Never allowed it.
So when they
It had-
built the church, they bought the house and just ran it along. I guess.
Yeah, it was planned to eventually.
Was that the parsonage, I imagine?
In this case, it would have to continue to be grandfathered in.
Definition.
But I don't see how we can assign a new address to the church if the church and the house share a water tap.
Well, you could do a deduct meter.
You just label it 1A and 1B, basically.
You can add a second
Yeah,
meter
we can do that.
and then deduct them.
Yeah, that's the only thing I'd like to hear what the neighborhood has to say, but I would like to put a condition on it if this does go forward, that the back properties cannot be separated from the front properties, because then they would never have the needed parking. If it came down to some point where we decided to sell the back properties on Douglas, then that would be a problem.
So the condition that you would have would apply to all 4.
All 4 properties.
What's your plan for parking?
So originally, when I started asking questions, there's all in capacity of the church building, that's how we figure out parking. And I was under the impression that the back lot was enough to support the amount needed directly behind the 2 buildings. Not the back 2 parts. So I was told without those 2 parcels in at all, the parking lot behind the 2 buildings would support. But actually,
If you look at the building as a church, it's 1 space for every 5 seats. And what would you tell me the occupancy was? So he would only need basically 35, 40 parking spaces.
Yeah, but if it's your occupancy is 100 and over 120 and it's an event space, you're more looking at 60.
Yeah.
Or 50. More. Maybe more. I was just curious if you were gonna do parking back there and pave it, or make it all green, or do parking in green.
the back lot.
Yeah.
So the plan right now is to refinish this. This is all gonna be blacktop all the way. Mr. Blair told me that now for code, that's what needs to happen. There are catch basins here already. There's catch basin here and back here as well for the runoff. This all was blacktop at one point. It's just turned to gravel, but it was blacktop. So catch basin. And then this side is almost completely grass. If you drive back there, it's growing up so much. That's gonna stay green space. And this, we would like to leave that. Keep it to the full. At least part of it, maybe not. the whole thing, but we would like to have as much green space.
Barn stand.
Barn space. Give it another year and it'll fall over.
It looked that way.
Yeah, I don't know. Like he's been there for a long time.
I know for me on this, I mean, I'm happy to see something be used there. I think you had two buildings that were not living up to potential. I mean, this could easily be, 5 houses on those lots. Go into something else, which I don't think people would mind. The old church, losing an old church, I'd rather have it there. But I think we definitely need to do something with the addresses. I had that in my notes. I would say that before I knew about the water tap, I would say the house needs split off and the other 2 properties probably need to join. So you'd have 3 properties there total.
So when, on that note, when I call facilities, so with AEP, the church has an address at 280. So, and when I call Columbia Gas, it's 284.
We don't have either of those.
Right.
recorded.
So that has been a headache, but I'm the daily. I was told that we could fix that very easily.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen cases like this before in town where things weren't done correctly over the years. We've seen it before, and now we have to sift through it. So we've seen that before, but I think you need to true up the addresses, and the parcels to make them match, to make sure of how this goes forward. We don't want to have a mess 20 years down the road if you decide to sell it or however it shakes out. But I think at least going into 3 properties there, if you decided to raise the buildings, you'd have 3 nice properties that go back through, less to deal with later. The garage, I'm glad to see that you're going to get rid of that because that was something that I had. Bringing the parking up to standard, we would definitely, as Jim said, require the paving in the front, but a gravel overflow lot, I don't know that we would go for that either. I mean, going through the paving, we could at least leave it conditional for a time frame of where everything needs to either be paved or green space back there. The house, if you do plan on tearing down the house, I mean, are you more likely to keep that as a rental? Do you have a timetable for how long you want to keep it as a rental? 5-10 years. Okay. So, I mean,
We may decide.
right.
Put money in it and keep it.
Right. I want to have a concrete plan as far as the rental, whether it'll be torn down within, I'm fine 6 months to a year, but any more than that, we might as well act as if the house is going to be there in perpetuity. Signage on the building. I know that the signage there on site is not necessarily adequate for what we'd like to see. So I would like to see some upgraded signage, possibly just even something on the building itself, on the front of the building, something that looks nice, clean, presentable, not glowing in the middle of the night since it is more residential there. With some down lighting, lighting on the parking lot itself is something I would look at because yes, you have houses that are right there. So we definitely don't need the area, to glow all night. Maybe something that turns off at a certain hour, or half the lights go out at a certain time, something like that. There is street lights there. It is lit up. So, I mean, anything that is going to keep it reasonably, with what we have for the street lights and not add any more, I think would be fine. And then as far as traffic, going in and out and the occupancy. So you have the occupancy of the church at 125, the very corner building. I mean, what is that, like the fellowship hall, or what do you call that? Okay. What's the capacity on that? How many? 250. Okay. So yeah, we would definitely need to have adequate parking for all that. Not every event's going to have that. It's been operating. The fellowship hall currently operates in some capacity, right? Okay. And how many people do they currently have? Okay. But I mean, on average, do you know an average number at all? Okay. So there is activity coming and going into there right now. So we would want to look at that as far as traffic and which way that goes. I would definitely want to see it come out onto 37. I know those other lots back there have ingress and egress into that back. Was that Casson that's there? I wouldn't want to see extra traffic spilling onto Casson or so much down Douglas. I'd rather see it go out straight out 37. So I don't know if that's something that we could at least put a berm up through there or put some trees out through there and kind of limit the traffic out onto Casson.
I would like to see that as well. Really the bottom line.
Yep,
Out through.
straight out 37. Okay. Any other questions from the board?
I do want to also go quick say, I do know, however, that a lot of the neighbors back there do use that for parking. Have an issue with that, so blocking that off.
Okay.
But, you know, there's quite a lot of that back lot, a little bit. But we'll stick on the block that's too bad.
Okay. All right. Well, I definitely want to hear public comment on this. Any other, before we open to public comment, were there any letters submitted by anybody? Anything?
There was no letters. I had one personal visit and 2 phone calls.
Okay. And what was the reaction on those?
Just asking questions, and one, I think both of the individuals are here tonight.
Okay. All right, great. Yep. If you'd have a seat, we'll open to public comment and then we can bring you back up at the end.
Right, one thing real quick. I just might make a suggestion. Coming off of Casson, maybe making that an entrance only
Maybe, yeah.
as a suggestion,
Or Casson or Douglas.
coming off of Casson. Just making
Probably
it
have to filter out on a Douglas.
right.
If he's using that house as a rental, where's the car gonna be?
They have a driveway in there.
Yeah.
Isn't it the one?
At this one,
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they have a driveway. right?
Right, that's what I'm saying. How are they gonna get to,
there's a
how are they gonna get to,
structure here.
yeah. Or just go straight on a 37.
So if he has a parking lot all the way across the back of both of those buildings, you can go out onto Douglas and then out on
Oh, yeah,
37.
That's okay, that's what I thought. You
That's
just
the
said-
only
you said
way.
Straight on a 37. I was like.
That's the
wait.
only way. I mean, yeah, if he would raise the house on day one and then we completely take
Just
off to
parking.
Douglas, but yeah.
Uh,
Like I
Logan,
said, it's a cool project, the logistics of it. I think there's just a lot of logistics to get it to fit within the community.
with the 2 back parcels that you talked about, because I appreciate you giving some history on or some forethought on what you want to do with those. I'm a proponent of green space, so keeping the one continuing to grow to grass, I think is a good idea. Buffering is never really a bad thing in my mind with respect to this. The other property you talk about gravel for overflow, something I might consider is I think that's probably going to need a variance at some point rather than having a decision on that this evening. So I might hesitate on utilizing that in the short term. But something to think about that we brought up when we were talking about design was something that's maybe a semi-permeable that can be put into the ground that is a hard enough surface to park on, drive on, and have traffic, but allows grass to grow. And then it also drains. So it's not a hard surface like an asphalt or a concrete, but it's semi-permeable. You see some of those at parks and things like that. So in order to continue to maintain as much green space in that place as possible, but also maybe double it up for parking when and if needed, that just might be a consideration if it gets to that point. But I just wanted to throw that out there because we did talk about that through.
Those are cool. Have you looked at the cost of them though? Well, yeah, I looked at the cost after we talked about them. I do like them. I'd like to see one in a lot more places, but when they look at gravel and paving,
Sure.
pavings is cheaper and easier.
Aesthetics and
Yeah.
short and long-term cost considerations, just a cost benefit analysis on what you're gonna do.
Okay, we'll go ahead and open to public comment. Anyone who, yep, if you could come up to the podium or. We'll just need your name and address.
Okay, my name is Warren Butt. I live 269 South Castle. My property My wife and I have lived there for over 55 years. Our property, that's against the property in question. Do you mind if I give you just a very brief history? of
Sure.
this? The church was built in 1915. The first mass was there Christmas night, 1950. The parsonage was built right about that time, right about 15, 16 time frame. Place for father. That's where they put it. The house next to it was put up. Where the social hall is was at one time the residence of Baptist minister here. Big white frame house, and back in the late or mid about 74, 1975, Catholic Church bought it from the McFarland. The church had tried to buy that property for many years. There's some steps in the back of the church, very back. Those were so that they could use that house. The priest was going to leave the sacristy and go to that house. The steps were never used because the deal fell through with the Catholic. So, but they built the social hall in 1970. Committee that there's a two pieces, two parcels in the back. Parcel next to our property, and then there's a second parcel. The second parcel was part of the original McFarland property. When the church bought that, they bought that property. They found out they did some mixing. So when it came time to make that, or when they sat down to talk to the heirs said, we don't want to sell it. And they just didn't want to sell it. So what they did, arranged to have a straw man go in there and buy the property. Father Atwood came in and bought the property. Saved all that. So that's how the properties are used together. I don't want to digress, but I thought you might appreciate some of the history of it. But here, the lots, the entire two lots, one time, they were tarred and feathered, if you will. They're all tarred, and it's all chips and stone and put on. But it was it cost you to maintain, so they didn't do it. They didn't follow it. So that's why you go out there. If you look carefully, you can scrape some of the grass off and you'll find this underlayment of chips. And it's hard to say, how did that get collapsed? The original left's gonna be a parking lot. But when the church bought that rectangular piece, it was left as a grassy area. The church is so small back there, 50 generations back in the day. And there's no need for it. But they had it, and they used to put it out there for in later years, parking became a problem. John here is talking about parking. We moved out here because there was no parking, and we were coming apart the steep. Well, people there, you just feel the bricks moving sideways because and when we were full up, there was that whole lot was full. The two pieces, two properties, parking immediately back of the churches. Then they're up and down the streets. This is before parking was forbidden on the streets. Instead of Castle Street, the last street down from my house, get a new park. And after the church left, put it to no park. Before that, there's park up and down the street. Just on our side. And we're Catholics, I figured we wouldn't think about people parking our yard. But up and down Douglas also. So I would question, thankfully, that the whole house in that church, that parking lot's going to be back. I would question that. Spaces to see if didn't want to digress, but I thought maybe since there's a struggle here, I thought perhaps you might appreciate a little history lesson on this.
Yeah, we appreciate
Oh,
the history.
oh, great.
Always appreciate the
That's
history.
great.
Yeah.
Any questions on what I said?
The only question I have is, and I would assume that Terry Priest knows the history that you gave, because I would want to make sure that that's,
He's Methodist. I don't think he knows that.
because I love it. I love the history.
So we're very good.
No, that's great. Great history.
I'm sure Terry knows most of it.
I think you've got a valid call about the parking. I think that's what we're talking about too. One thing to consider is the code requirement, and the other to consider is the actualization of what happens. And so, yeah, I think that's a very valid call out.
Kind of want to set the record straight a little bit on the parking, but I think it needs to be understood. Yeah, we have mass, the busiest mass. parking. Let me proceed, and then there may be some others. As I said, I've been a resident there, my wife and I. Been there since 1966. Living down here. And so we have the side yard and the back. Which is most affected by it. And I have some concerns about a business being there. Primary concern. It is a business, a for-profit business in a residential area. And you're down that slippery slope, putting in commercial property as an enclave, if you will, in a residential district. Pretty darn hard to turn anybody down. You get somebody in Tiger Run that wants to, are living in his house, and wants to make it into a parlor, bookstore, anything, any so-called legitimate business. Hard to turn it down. Here's the president. You've already done it here. But anyway, I do have some concerns. I did read through the zoning ordinances. I looked probably needed severely. It's dated 1999 when I was. And I'm not for sure necessarily it's changed since then. But in my reading, I didn't see anything there that would give me a compelling reason to approve this application. And my way of thinking, if you're going to approve the application, there should be a compelling reason. Now, the gentleman here intends to make money, and that's fine. That's what it's all about. But I find it hard to think of making money as a compelling reason for approving a commercial business in actually the top class of the business. I'm very, very, very concerned. Everyone don't want to see it. Our reason, we've had, since the church moved out in the use of Christ moved in, and we've also had Alcoholics Anonymous indications. I can't put it in the backyard with trash, hot cans, beer cans, all bags, pizza box, all that stuff. Well, events over there. And I'm a little bit soured on. So I don't have anything more to say. That's why I would urge a vote on this application. Primarily for personal reasons, because firsthand experiences with other groups there. But I'd also add a cautionary note. If you decide to go in this direction, I should probably have a nice argument against doing it in other areas. I run, somebody may come along, maybe not. Never go down the road and say, I want to put a business here. You did it to that guy down South Main Street. Now you've got to be- Anyway, thank you very much for your time. I've taken much more than I said. Thank you. very
Thank you.
much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, further public comment.
Rob, you know, 27. Lots of. So, and I forget the gentleman's name, but I agree with the parking situation. That's the events at times. And parking lots is difficult. So, it's supposed to be parking would be adequate for full time. I also have some other concerns. I do like history. I appreciate the history of the building. Let's look at Johnstown. I mean, I actually look back to see the things, 1915, original were changed over. It's been a church since that time. And, you know, I'd like to see it stay as a church building. I recognize things change. Church had needed to move. And I understand that, respect that. I respect the improvements. There've been some improvements lately, some paintings, some cleaning things. I appreciate the people that have done that. That makes it better. It's helpful. I do not like to have a business in the midst of a residential area. It's R1, so have more restrictions on the property. I am just across from R1 church. In fact, the church couldn't even be built there today because there's a 3-acre requirement for the church there. So therefore, it's, you know, as long as it stays as is, you know, fine. I have no problem. It belongs all with the church. I've got along fine with them, no issues. And one of the things I'd like to read a little bit, Mr. Lee has, I'll take from the same section, 131.01 purpose, and this is the most current that I can find. This is local legislation current for July 6th, 2021. The purpose is under some unusual circumstances, proposed use which more intensely affects an area than those uses permitted in the zoning district in which it is located may nonetheless be desirable and compatible with permitted uses if that use is properly controlled and regulated. Such uses shall be listed as conditional uses with the description of respective zoning districts. Planning and Zoning Commission may allow such use to be established as a conditional use where these unusual circumstances exist and where the proposed use will be consistent with the general purpose and intent of the planning and zoning code. My understanding would be this would not be consistent with that. And also in the application for conditional use under section 1131.02, item C, a narrative statement evaluating the effects on adjoining property and a discussion of the general compatibility with adjacent other properties in the district. And I have, you know, seen that in the application or other things. It's a discussion, but I think that's an important point for the evaluation. So, you know, I do have some concerns, you know, being next to it as far as, you know, what lighting might have, lighting might affect it. I do, there is a dusk to dawn light in my backyard. There isn't one on the street. But I do have one. It was there when I moved in. I moved into the house 2013. It's already there. I just maintain it. So I pay for it. I maintain it. So I don't know of any other lights there. Let's see, you know, there could be more than just weddings. I'm also concerned about that. I'm not against weddings. You know, I'm married and I strongly suggest it. Propose it. It's a good thing. So I'm not against weddings. However, receptions, I don't know how long they might last. What time of the evenings, especially an outdoor venue. We've had difficulties with previous residences in the past where things got kind of carried away. Very loud and late at night, unable to sleep. My wife and I contest the many sleepless nights of the neighborhood to the party. I mean, 2, 3 in the morning, and I mean, got to the point where, you know, wanted to call police, but then, you know, the guy guy's drunks. I mean, the owner of the house is drunk, so it's like, this is not gonna have a good end no matter what, so we elected not to, we talked to him. So, yeah, concerned about that. You know, would alcohol be served? Would a liquor license be asked for at some time in the future? You know, hope not, but what's to prevent it? So once it's approved, then we'd have control over that at that point. And then what other events? So Halloween parties, other things. I'm not a proponent of Halloween things, but you know, that's concerned that once the door is open, it's open to other uses, and we would have any say in it. So, you know, I would like to see the building stay. I'd like to see it maintained and used. I don't think this is going to be the best use for the property, so I would.
Thank you.
Thank you. Further public comment on this? All right.
My name is Eva Rock. I live right next door to that church. And I noticed that the property they applied for changing the function is actually all surrounded by houses on all sides. Some houses is only like 5 or 6 or several feet from it. My property is just a few feet from it. And one thing that particularly concerned me is they talk about the outdoor. He said that wedding, I have no problem with wedding, but he said that also, I have a copy of his letter right here. And all the second paragraph, also for parties. Parties. What kind of parties? Oh, I want to have if I come to his business, I want to have a Super Bowl bar party, any party, or even for wedding. They have a tent there. That's extremely concerning to me because you have a tent. I can bring a live band, music, band, sing. The ground can be shaking. As my husband has said, we have Neighbor Day party. They don't have a live band, but they outside in the backyard drinking, talking, 2, 3 o'clock in the morning. The ground actually shake. We have to move. We cannot sleep in our bedroom. I mean, we go to the end of the house to sleep because the ground is actually shaking. We have loud music. They were talking in the background. I mean, you think about outdoor, you can have a light band, then you can have music a few feet from your house all night long. That's not cool. And also, why would you approve a commercial right in the middle of residential? You're opening the slippery slope. I agree with that gentleman. And I appreciate Mr. Lee, you talk about that. Outdoor is totally, because if you have outdoor noise and music, I think the live band at that parking lot, you can hear it in the town square, I'm sure. Because a lot of times we can hear the music from the school, loud or something. If they have a ball game, we can hear it several streets away. And I have a copy from the staff report that they talk about the criteria of approval. Out of the 10 things here, I can see at least 5 or 6, which is basically no. Does it, that gentleman, the use, is it compatible with the conditional use of the zoning? The zoning of that church is UR1. And now he's talking about the church will be gone. They said if that church, for Christ, if they find a place, they will be gone. They'll be turning into commercial altogether. And you use it from a residential UR1 and change it to a GGC1. I look at the GGC1, some of the conditional use, the closest I can find is like assembly hall, which is basically if you want an assembly hall, they go to the downtown, find somewhere, not around people's houses. No, you don't want people that blow loud music around your house. And so does it harmonious with the internal character and the general vicinity and also essential character of the area? No, this is a residential. Why would you put a business on in the middle right about houses? Will it be like point number D? Will it be disturbing to the existing neighborhood? Of course, yes. Number A, detrimental to the economic welfare of the community? Yes. Why? You got a so noisy, so loud, so many traffic. By the way, Douglas is not supposed to end with two-way. It's not like Hong Kong. You got too many traffic, 100, 200 people on that little old residential kind of street. What the traffic? You're going to decrease the value of all the houses around it. I mean, it is detrimental to the house value of all the houses around it. And number G, excessive traffic noises, for sure. Number J, does it fit with the conditional use? I look at the UR1, the conditional use, I don't see anything that's comparing with the business, no. So I would strongly recommend all these gentlemen here to vote no on that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, further public comment. All right, hearing none, we'll go ahead and close public comment and bring back up our applicant. Yeah, church is gonna have festivals, weddings.
They could have events whenever they want.
Yeah.
Music.
Yeah.
Okay.
Catholic churches, fish fries, different things, yeah. So questions from the board?
Bailey or Jim, would the variance run with the land or does it stay with the owner? So if he did sell it to somebody else, wanted to,
The conditional use, you mean?
yeah,
The conditional use remains with the use. So if he has if he gets a conditional use here and decides to sell the property and someone new wanted to come in within 2 years and open the
Exact
do the
same.
exact same thing, the conditional use stays with the use. If someone were to come in and purchase the property and do something completely different, then that expires. Or if they were to come in after 2 years of the property being abandoned or the use being stopped, then it also expires.
The difficulty is that because we talked the slippery slope piece, somebody could come in and they could have an event center that's slightly different, but a little bit more intensive. And then that's the slippery slope that you see with respect to having this type of business within a residential. And that's the biggest concern that I have is the precedence that it would set. And its location.
Couldn't the church technically hold weddings there now? And receptions?
My problem with
receptions?
this, and I'll-
Just a question, like
I'll
they
give
could
my
technically do
analysis,
part
but-
of what he wants to do now.
Yeah, I, as I understand it, if it were to become a church again, I would think, yes, they would be allowed to do so, having been grandfathered in under the whatever zoning was in place in 1915, 16, 74, 75, et cetera.
Ben, the churches are allowed, they are permittable in all UR1 zoning districts.
Yeah, so it would be, but only because it hasn't been addressed in 106 years. And so looking at the current code as a baseline for how you would approach anything that is conditional or variance or above and beyond what the current use is, the difficulty I'm having is deviating from that to say it's acceptable based off of our new standards. Because like we said already, a church wouldn't be permitted to be built in that location today if it's a vacant piece of property. It's residential, period, unless somebody requests something else. And so deviating, which a variance or a conditional use is essentially a deviation. And this truly is because it's not explicitly stated. If you're utilizing the planning and the zoning document as an exclusionary document, then it's very straightforward that it's not.
One street over where GCC one,
I'm sorry,
one street over is GCC one.
that's one street over. Sure. Then change the zoning for the block and make it GCC one.
Just curious.
But this is UR one. So I get what you're saying. It's proximity to use. Absolutely. But with all of the neighbors surrounding it, not in support of it, and them being the ones that are affected most directly, even with the favorability of bringing that piece of property up to a better condition, it's very hard for me to sit here and support it Because I think that it sets a precedence that is hard moving forward. Absolutely appreciate the passion and the empathy to want to bring that piece up. But I just don't see where it fits in the current document. And again, like anything else, as a living document, if you want to change it, we can entertain changing it. But as it sits right now, it's residential currently zoned and is residential in the future land use map.
My trouble with this is currently it can be a church. Any church could come in there. If Mr. Malone starts a church, calls it Our Lady of Blessed Tax Salvation, opens up a nonprofit, he can have parties there tomorrow. So the proximity to what it could be used for right now is the trouble here. If you came to me and said, I want a gas station, I want a, a sandwich shop, anything, easily no. I would tell you no. You know.
Very specific, right? So. This conditional use does that. If I want to change my use at all. So I want the neighbors to know that as well. And I do also want to acknowledge the quiet times. I want to work with the neighbors. I don't want to be an entity. I want to work with the neighbors. And I want to see this building touch on. I could stick a sign in there tomorrow for rent and I could put a congregation of 125.
You could use it as a church.
There's nothing that we can do about that because it's a church. It's its current use.
Well, that's what I'm saying.
It's well quiet.
He can come in and have a congregation and use it that way.
Because it's been a church for 106 years. This is a deviation from a church to a business.
Just use sparse and hairs with for-profit, nonprofit with a
Well,
church.
yeah, because if he goes nonprofit,
If there wasn't
he's
a
gonna have the
separation.
same
then it
parties
would
with
be
no
defined.
tax money coming to Johnstown.
I think there's a difference too between when a church gets used and when it's busy. That's going to be, Sunday morning, Saturday afternoon. Whereas a wedding reception hall is going to be weekend evenings until, how late's a wedding go? How late's
11.
receptions?
Jorgensen's Farm, 11, got to be off premise by 12. With all your belongings.
Sure.
We can control quiet times. Obviously,
We
nothing.
already are at 11.
Right. We have things like that. This offers some control. I mean, a church comes in, you have a Wednesday service, you have a couple fellowship meetings, you have Saturday, Sunday, a lot of
You
times.
could have movies
day
on the
Saturday.
weekends outside.
You
in
have-
green
You have
space.
catechism in there, you have all sorts of classes, you have daycares that come in for the churches. That's what I'm saying. They could easily use this
all
just
day,
as,
every day.
just as many hours. That's why it makes it complicated. If you'd came to me with any other business, we would have easily said no. The fact that you're using it for a business that you could already do with some legwork is what makes it complicated. And then my question is, this comes in as a conditional use, so you can use it as that, but at what point do you look at non-conforming use? Because you're right. I mean, under UR1, we couldn't have that church there today. You couldn't build a bigger church. You could build an addition onto that church.
Yeah, because of the 3-acre rule.
Right. You couldn't tear it down and build a new church.
No, you cannot.
Anybody else, and this is the hang up as well with respect to UR1. Anybody else in a UR1, you could say UR2, you probably even pull it out to SR1 because of its closeness of use, right? The hierarchy of use. Could potentially come with a large enough piece of property and ask for the same thing.
Yeah.
And that's the slippery slope piece of it with respect to residential. That's why we have home occupancy permits for having these types of businesses in a residential space.
If
And
you,
the strict constraints associated with it. This to me is a deviation. I can't look at it as just this piece of property, but any other residential property within.
I get it, but if you come under the guise of a church, if I build a church on a 3-acre property in town and it's just Church of Ryan Green and all I'm gonna do is have events there, I can get away with this.
Okay.
That's the trouble of it.
Just the theory that if you let someone do something at this one means that we have to do it every time doesn't hold true. Just because, like,
doesn't.
if I wanted to, like the lady that came in that wanted to do the dog grooming business out of her house, everybody on the road can't come and say they want to do dog business, and you're not always going to give everybody the same legway, right? Like,
Agreed.
there's only so many buildings that you're gonna be able to do this with,
Agreed.
right? Like, let's just use for example, what if somebody wanted to come in and do something similar at the old train station, right? There's businesses back there, there's houses right there, it's got parking. Like, that's where you get into, there's only so many places that people could do it. Will we have as big of a problem with it there? I mean, you have Cantrell Plumbing's right there, but that building could be turned into anything because they don't even own it. There's other businesses there. I mean, are they going to bother as many people back there? I mean, there's still houses. I mean, I get that there's houses around it. The issue is it's owned by people that have a fellowship, correct? Now they could have a festival every weekend. We couldn't do anything about it until 11 o'clock at night. They could have weddings there right now till 11 o'clock at night.
Provided it falls within the rest of the ordinances.
Yeah, as long as they're not being noisy outside after a
Sure.
certain time, they could set tents up and have a party every weekend they could play
don't
movies
dis- I
outside.
don't disagree.
That's why it's like a weird, it's a strange.
That's why
one.
this
I understand
one's,
all the
that's why
concerns.
this one's
Just-
tough.
Agree. Yeah. And I would love to see something here to preserve that space and to preserve that building in the 106 years that it has represented. Every single person that came up tonight is not in favor of it because the business. That's why the letters are sent out to everybody surrounding a parcel. And had everybody come in and wanted to support it, I think it would have been a little bit of a different story, but everybody not wanting to have that type of intense use in their area where the request is a deviation from what is currently zoned and what's on the future land use map moves the needle for me enough. I just, with how the code is written and what is being applied, I appreciate absolutely what you're trying to do and the vision that you have, because I think it's great. With respect to the zoning code, I can't see supporting it.
And not to marginalize anybody who's come in tonight, because I definitely appreciate any public comment and feedback that I get, but it's two houses out of the surrounding property. The other ones either did not feel the need that it was important, they didn't pay attention, or they're in support of it. We won't know. But
Yes, 9 letters.
Again, I want to work with those families. But of the 9 letters we sent out, we had 2 come in. They were, like you said,
they didn't feel strongly enough to voice their opinion.
Well, I don't know if you can make that as the overarching reason when you have a lot of other variables that factor into motivation with respect to work schedule, family schedule,
They emailed,
et cetera.
called.
I get that, but I don't think you just boil it down to just that one. You don't care enough, so you don't. I get what you're saying. I understand.
Yeah, if we could open back up to public comment,
Gotta come back.
I'll have you, we'll shuffle a bit.
Sorry for that.
Sorry.
The walk around.
Well, the letter that I got, I received on Friday.
Okay.
So I think that may make a difference as far as I received a letter on Friday. I looked on the web, I could not find any information. So I called Mr. Blair on Monday morning about 9:30 and asked about it and said, is there additional information? May I see the application? And he said, no, it's no different. Yeah, I just got the 1 page, just public notice, that's all I got. So that was all the information I had. Then this evening, when I went to see the packet for the meeting, that's when I got more information, when I found out about put out a 40 10. So that raised some concerns of being an outside possible thing. So that's, again, I appreciate the work. I mean, as I said earlier, to make the Johnstown better. I'm here to make Johnstown better too. I'm committed up here. So it's like I want it better for everyone. I just want to use the system. As a church, there's not many things you can do to, as long as they're staying within the ordinances, if that's fine, so be it. And, you got a hard decision. I've been here myself, so I'm.
You're talking about the outside. So if they were to have events only inside, would it bother?
it depends on how loud and how much traffic. I mean, whereas at times there's been, you know, I live.
Yeah, because the bike trail's at the end of your road, right?
Well, yeah, the bike trail's on down here, but you know, my driveway's here, so people come in and turn around. And a lot of times they'll drive on the grass because the road's not quite wide enough for two vehicles.
Right.
So that's another issue is, you know, another detriment to it. So as far as, it's just really not quite wide enough for two vehicles to easily pass through there. Now, the right of way is wide enough because right of way actually goes to here. And I don't know the history of that, but you know, where I've got blacktop there, that's actual property line. So I assume it was for drainage, possible future expansion. And also here, this was originally laid out as right of way for Concord, I believe, and things. So city's elected not to utilize that. You know, that's fine. I'm glad. So yeah, when the parking lot's full and people are starting, you know, there's actual parking here as well. And it's not great, but it is there and things. And so, you know, I've had some concerns with people using my driveway and also the Williams back here, they could use it as well. For the access.
I'm not sure how the fellowship hall ever got built there because it defies, it's against side and front setback.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, but it's there.
Yeah.
So, I accept that. I
Correct.
mean, it's there. People at the church have been fine. I mean, they haven't caused us any issues and things, and they haven't been worried using that. And sometimes they'll have an event out back, they'll throw frisbee, whatever, have fun, but it hasn't been an issue. So it's been good. I just hope that Ryan Green Church doesn't do it.
I'm just saying if it, you know,
I quite well take it. You know, I understand that. You know, there's nothing you can do about that, but you do have control about whether this conditional use is accepted or not. So,
I just, you know, a church like Rock City could come in tomorrow and buy this as one of their satellites. They have fill the whole thing up and they have events every weekend
sure.
and every night of the week. And they do.
Yeah. Yeah.
I also wanted to address the about bringing down property values. I would argue the opposite of that. We have put a considerable amount of time and money into this property. It looks way better than it could be done. On Main Street, on Douglas, on Cass, the back lots, we trimmed down, knocked down all the bushes, all the weeds, all the anything we have not done is the boundary between us and Warren right here, because I want to have a survey into the actual property line. And we actually do want to come back and ask about a fence for the division. So I do want to make that. You want to put a fence. But I would argue that we are making the neighborhood look better because the abandoned church building has been nothing but a nice. And just getting the brush off of it, painting it, lighting it up, like the front lights, the sidewalks turned out. Both buildings, stuff like that. We are bringing the neighborhood up. And anybody's property.
Now, with this being a conditional use, where do we get into non-conforming use? If we went down that road, if we label this as a non-conforming use.
You're going to have the same issues.
I
basically.
mean, talking about businesses that are in the middle of a commercial space, we have Bullfrog down there.
Yeah.
And they allowed, zoning board allowed a business to go into there.
Well, that's because it was already zoned GCC 1.
Yeah. But I mean, it's an
Yeah.
operation.
It's like John said,
One
you're,
street over where
yeah,
GCC
GCC 1 starts at Jersey. So,
because my house is in it. Because I have.
Yeah.
That's like that brings that's why I just asked, because I was like, I know there's like a whole slew of
yeah, there
things
is.
that people can do with their houses back there, and I'm like,
And most of the houses can't be used for anything other than residential because they don't meet their parking requirements. That's kind of a saving grace, I guess I would say. We've had other people approach us about using property on South Main for some type of business. And it was denied because you could not qualify for parking. The property wasn't big enough.
And that's the problem you have down 62 as well. And down
Sure.
62 with the dental offices and different things like that.
Correct.
It's the same, it's the same exact thing. I mean, like I said, unfortunately, this is a unique mess that we inherited that shouldn't have been there probably to begin with, other than just the church. with
If
the
you,
fellowship hall, the parking, things like that.
if you think about it, and when Logan first started talking with us about it, if you think about it in the context of, it is a church building, the structure is a church, it was always used as a church, and that's the only thing it's ever been used for. Yes, he's cleaned it up. They had a bat problem, a mold problem, and the church owners, before they sold the property, were aware of that, and the Youth for Christ knew it when they bought it. If you just used the church as a religious wedding, and didn't have receptions there and didn't have outside entertainment, I would say there isn't any way we could stop that. I don't know how we could, because that's what it is, and that's what it was before. And you'd have to put a name on it. It would have to have a name identifying it as a house of worship and to be used as a wedding. But when you go out of that space and you want to use the outside space in the fellowship hall, it kind of changes the whole mode of what you're asking for. So just a thought.
And I mean, unfortunately, we're talking about a building that it's been in distress for a while. Unfortunately, I mean, from an enforcement standpoint, we never were, for whatever reason, it was never enforced on the parking lot and the upkeep of the building. And now we're in this situation. The barn that's over there is definitely in disrepair. So I think you have a chance to fix up that corner. The barn would be gone. There are trade-offs. I think and that's where we're at. The only reason, as I've said, that makes it tough.
And that's a point I made with Mr. Butt, that yes, his property adjoins it, and he was telling me about the water runoff problem, and what we were talking about would actually, I think, help you if it was paved behind you, the parking lot would. I was unaware of that.
Beautiful.
I've seen it overflow.
You still want that building.
This is why when we talk about our long-term plan was, okay, make up on a pig, right? How much money did we put in this house? Knowing the water issue. Let's split it up. There was some work that some work that I did last 6 months. Not saying it yet, but I am aware of the sinkhole. Check on it. It hasn't moved yet. I'm sure it will. I'm aware.
Well, 100-year rains are every 5 years now, just FYI.
Yeah, I think it's quicker than that.
Yeah.
And Ryan, one other point just worth noting, about 5 or 6 years ago, I met with 2 architects that had designed went to work on this property. And they were going to connect the church to the fellowship hall, right in about in the middle of the church wall there. They were going to tear the house down and build a new house behind the existing house. And they had some really great ideas, and they tried to raise money for the Youth for Christ to make it happen. And it bottomed out. They gave up on the project.
I
So
wouldn't mind. I'd like to see 5 houses go in there. It'd be an easier decision to make, or just a park. But
Take one out and do 4
But-
instead.
I wouldn't mind. But here we are with another unique mess that we've inherited. Much like a couple of the other ones that we've had to deal with where the decision may not be popular, but I think it's better than alternatives. We'll open it up for another public comment.
One of the gentlemen mentioned that, there's only two representatives from two household came on the meeting. A lot of people don't come, maybe they vote yes. From the letter that we received, they only mentioned weather, they didn't mention party, they didn't mention tent on the outside. So when we saw the final letter that we got it, because my husband never actually called on Monday, called Mr. Blake about, okay, what are the, besides what event? That's all, wedding. But when they look at the weather, parties, all the other stuff, tent on the outside, that's really troubling. And also, if he talked about, it's not equal to increase the value, think about it. When you look at the house, you saw loud noisy in the middle, because I actually read books about how you buy a house. They said, make sure you go at night, in the nighttime, and drive around and see where the neighborhood is going. If you drive around and see huge people with loud band there, will you buy a house 5 feet from there? No. And that's decreased house value. And if you try to allow a UR1 zoning property, allow them to use it as a GG1, you open a dangerous door. Then other houses can say, oh, I'm UR1. I want to change the business too. And also the taxes, I don't know, because churches don't pay taxes. And now they changed the use actually to GG1 with a UR1 zoning. Are they going to pay taxes? Houses will pay taxes. But if you use it, you earn money, you don't pay taxes. Thank you.
Thank you. Under this, they would pay taxes.
Yes,
It'd be a building.
they would pay. I believe I'd have to look, and Bailey can maybe look at that Use for Christ pays real estate taxes, but I'm not 100%.
They would have real estate taxes, but this would be similar to a home occupation, so they would pay taxes on that business.
Yeah, I think they would have to pay taxes on the profit.
Yep.
The profit, yes.
Yes, go ahead. Jess?
I did look at the tax records, and they do pay property taxes on the house, but not on the church and the.
Right.
Okay,
As you would expect.
yes, thank you.
As a church, you wouldn't.
Right.
But as a business, it would fall under.
They do pay taxes on that. So this- I would say
Yeah, so the auditor still has it recorded as a church.
Yes,
I can't, I'm sorry.
if you could come up here,
Thank you.
just for the record and the people at home.
Just for the record, when the social home was built, it wasn't permitted by the town. It isn't like we just decide, well, build it, and so forth. If it was fully approved by the town, I don't know the imagination behind how that happened.
Why-
All legal. Back in I think it's 75. The fire department came first a while, the house down. Additionally, church was built over a 2-year period. And it wasn't occupied until Christmas. Night. 15. It wasn't in very bad shape. It's been allowed to deteriorate because nobody used it.
Right.
And when the Use for Christ took over, we talked about it, and I said, why don't you come in there and board up the windows and play basketball? Once the church is desanctified, so to speak, by bishop, we use it. Hopefully, something nice, but once the church is out, anyway, I just wanted to do that.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, like we said, we run into this all the time. We usually love the use that it's going to get that day, but 20 years down the road, when it's a different guy, we've had this conversation over and over. When it's a different person, different business, something like that, are we still going to like it? And what do we leave ourselves open to? That's kind of where this falls into, but. Any further questions? Are you ready for a vote or? Table this or?
The only statement that I'll make, and I think everybody is aware, I absolutely appreciate it. I can't support it. But if there is support, I would suggest conditions.
Lots of conditions.
Yeah, I think it would be subject to several.
I won't vote for it.
I think I would ask, I'm open. to it. But I think, I do also want to ask the question of what happens with the property. It goes back into abandoned for another 15 years, it's for another 15 years, or I rent it to the church and then lease it back to abandoned. I just want to do this the right way,
Sure.
and I want the rest. But I hope. But I do have a question of this railroad. What happens? And I've come up with a use that is so close to what it's been used for. I don't think you're gonna get a better application.
It's gonna
or a
tie.
split closer. I think everything else is gonna be
It's not affirmative.
Yeah, and the response that I make to that is similar to what I said, is it's not so much this specific situation, but this specific piece. It's relevant to the code, the map, the incorporation therein, the application of it, how we go about making decisions based on historical application, taking this into account as well, if it is something that does get passed. Fact that event center or something to that effect is not listed under UR1 as a conditional use. And treating the planning and zoning document as an exclusionary document is a tilting factor in my view. Because it's not just here and now, it's next week, next month, next year, 3, 4, 5, 6 years. How we apply this document with any future considerations in that same vein. Again, I commend you for the vision.
the only reason I did
Sure. Honestly, I looked at GCC 1, I looked at GCC 2. But I couldn't justify having a recommendation to rezone to a purely commercial district with all of the other permitted and conditional uses in what would essentially look like spot zoning at that point within the middle of a residential area. I couldn't get there with that. I think for me, it's close. I absolutely respect the conversation and the comments and the considerations from the balance of the neighboring homeowners that came in and spoke tonight. I can't get there. And that's why I said, for me, I can't vote yes for it based off of the book, how it's set up, future application of the code and everything like that. But if it is favorable moving forward, I would suggest conditions to ensure that the application for this is at least buffered by some reasonable considerations.
Well, I would argue, if our applicant is in favor, I think in light of the current temperature of the situation and being that we're down a member tonight, to have an adequate vote on this, would you be in favor of tabling this until the next meeting?
I do feel that both sides are disadvantaged.
Yep. Well, if you're in favor, I'll go ahead and make a motion to table this.
I'll second.
All right, could we have a roll call?
Yes, Bentley,
No,
Ron Dane,
Yes.
Chairman Green,
Yes.
John Merriman.
Yes.
Thank you, and we'll take this up at the next zoning meeting. Next
January
zoning meeting,
25th. Need to schedule a meeting for the 14th.
okay,
That's
for the 14th of this month.
Of December.
All right. Well, thank you. I appreciate you for coming in and I appreciate the public feedback. We always like our public feedback and I don't blame you if you don't want to stick around, but we'll move on to our next application. If you'd like to hear the spirited debate on that one, feel free to stick around. So we'll go on to application Z-21-203, the COA for 921 West Coshocton Street.
This is an application for a certificate of appropriateness for a property on US 62. It is proposed to be an Ace Hardware store and it's currently located in a GCC 2 zoning district. It's proposed to be an around 18,000 square foot building with 63 off-street parking spaces, which is the required number of parking spaces required in our zoning code. You guys have some sketches of the property as well as a color kind of front elevation of the property as well. And I believe that the architect, Mr. Pontia, will be speaking on behalf of the property owner.
This is use like more than that. Site distance on it. Set this up so the building on the site plan. The building being here, the entry being here, that entry point is basically where it is now into the site. That's an access detached that allows access to the back of the site for barn store remains and storage that access. We set that up also so as you come around, it sort of separates the patron use with the parking right. The semis and such also come back, and that is the loading dock and shipping receiving area in the back. So we're trying to separate that cross traffic. Semi. So this entry is really just pretty close to where you're coming into the site. So you can see where you'll be seeing the garden center. The colors on this are coming off a little bit different than reality. But you'll be able to see where the main entrances of the building, where we've separated the garden center, acts as an accent on that corner, and that is what comes off as looking at the screen on the front. The floor plan is set up so the actual retail portion of this is 12,000 square feet. And then the back of the house where some modest staffing, but mainly shipping, receiving, or the building will come out of that area. We set up parking. We look at the parking zoning. You don't have a specific parking requirement for storage type facility. What we looked at is the front of the building being 12,000 square feet at 1 to 200. That gives us 60 spots. The closest thing we could find in your zoning text, the way we looked at it, was the industrial, which is 1 parking spot for every 2 employees. There's roughly 6 employees in the back, so that's where we came up with spots. On the site, there is an opportunity to put more in, but the 60. So, yeah, parking around the garden center, and then this back area is where the shipping, receiving, semi-truck maneuvering would go, separating those. I'll walk through some of the finishes real quick. Materials we are using on the building.
base of the building as you go around is focused on. Wainscot goes around the entire building. The awning portion that goes across helps break down the scale of the building. This is champagne standing seam metal roof. That would be the same color as the horizontal panel on the garden center. It matches with that. The above, what we've done on that on the garden center, that is a siding, the sample did not arrive. That is a James Hardy product. It's called an artesian cementitious board. The artisan way to stack, they don't overlap. They stack on top of each other. I actually have a few. Actually stack, if you will, so you don't get the overlap. It's a little bit more temporary, if you will. And that's what we have underneath the lower slope roof. That's important with the police department does their displays. They have shelving that goes around the perimeter, but we did want to get some lighting in there. So we did the lighting above that to get lighting in the space. Squares up there, if you will. The actual materials on the entry, there's an awning that protrudes. The main field around the building is Neef's material. This is the main field of the building. So this is the main entry piece. See, it's dramatically different, less confused. And this is the main field. So you do all these together. Nice. Slight accent with the white trim around the ace, which is this. Lighter color. That's the majority of the finish, is how that sets up. With that, I think that sort of summarizes the building, the elevations, and specific questions. Stop there if you will. Questions you may have.
Yeah. Ron, you want to lead off?
Site issues, and I'm not sure how aware everyone is. There's a Marathon oil pipeline in the back in the south corner. It does skirt into the back, maybe 30-40 feet of the property. And I think there's at least in the business park, there was 100-foot easement on that. So I'm not sure how close that comes to the building, but it looks like it might be.
It actually comes through this corner, so we're clear of that.
But that's the center line, but I think it's got a 100-foot easement on it.
The survey that our civil
Did you have it?
engineer had shown that as the easement lines for the lines.
Got it. Okay.
Okay.
The other question, right now, it's not part of the village. I assume this is going to be annexed into the village.
This
It is in the village?
It falls in our design as a corridor district. In the corridor district.
The Planning and Zoning Commission rezoned this from light manufacturing to GCC.
Two.
Yeah, but I can't remember when exactly it was. I think it was earlier this year or maybe at the later end of last year, but it was this commission.
It still shows in our zoning map as light manufacturing, but I think it's two.
Yeah.
Everything down through there's two.
Great, thank you.
I've got other questions, but go ahead.
All right. I know as far as several things on the design review, I at least had kind of hoped that this would be one of the first projects that they got to take on. It didn't go out that way, but that's all right. We have our design review passed. I do know that this doesn't fall with a couple things on there, especially setback parking. I know for zoning, the parking lot in the back, you're wanting that to be gravel, or is that going to be paved?
It's concrete.
It's all paved now?
Concrete.
Okay. All right, it's all concrete. All right, so that works.
And the detention, I'm sorry, the detention, what we did is we set this up, the detention for the site actually sets up in back.
Okay.
So it's sort of back here. That's pretty much all the detention. Is right in back.
It works. I do know as far as the setback, I mean, you're gonna be one of the first buildings that we have into the village. So I know that we have something that we're working on there as far as walkability, setback, parking. We had tried to make most of the parking behind the buildings. So having 2 rows out front is not necessarily what we were going for there. So I know that that was one aspect of it. And a couple other things here, but we'll go through the board and come back. So I don't know that we'll necessarily make a decision tonight on this. We may end up tabling as well. But we'll see where we get to. Yeah, man.
Let's wait and see.
Just looking at the facade and the design itself, several areas within our design review districts and standards notes harmony with surroundings, similar features to other buildings in that space. The building that you are showing has a flat roof. Just about every other building over there down 62 has some kind of pitch associated with it, with the exception of the fast food places and the auto parts places. We won't open those. But other buildings recently approved have some kind of dimension to their roof. So I was just curious the design consideration for not putting that on here.
Goes to sort of clarify the ownership of what type of building they want to do. Also somewhat goes to, if you look at your new design concepts, Mr. Green already referenced this document. I have to have there to look at this context.
Correct?
So to stay within the context of that, there's also areas in the middle, large retail centers. CBS, excluding the fast food. Auto parts stores. So I can make a similar argument that most of the buildings in the area.
O'Reilly's has a pitched roof.
There
Yeah.
are some that do. I'm sorry. Have some say.
Yes, O'Reilly's has a pitched roof. The most recent buildings built in Johnstown, O'Reilly's, Troyer's, Hopewell Credit Union, all have pitched roofs.
The Troyers, I don't think.
Troy's would still fall within the same district, similar districts.
I understand the same district. We're talking about, again, these, a very key phrase, this document is this, the context of this, and I do a lot in Boston. The context of this does not support it in Boston. Parking behind a larger, mid and large size boxes, which you'll see in your own zoning text, that you say the largest width of a building would be 100 feet. The largest depth is 75 or 75 feet. That gives you 75 feet. That's in your text. And I thought that was a mistake when I first read it. I don't think it is actually. This is written for smaller types of buildings, smaller type buildings. You know, park behind, walk around. Being a semi in that type of scenario is literally impossible. You have cross traffic with people, semis, which is usually not. So really the design text of this is when the owner initially bought this in line 17 or 20, had it rezoned. This type of use under the full knowledge, they going to be in a larger race hardware. There were no mentions of them of these design guidelines. We started the design during that process of designing this. That's when these became an act. I immediately sort of tried to set the meeting with staff. They thought we had met the context of what we're doing within the context of so this document, sort of I understand it's the first part. So that's kind of just the background.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
Did you own the one in New Albany too, right? The Ace in New Albany, right? Did you design that one? I'm just curious because that one has a pitch roof. It also has windows in the front. Just some questions. It's 4 windows. I go there all the time. I know what it looks like. Just
The owner did not want to do it in that style. It was forced by law to do that.
yep.
Yeah, takes that direction.
Just curious because I figured that he owned both of them.
Initial design, they don't have a place for that.
Page 12, corridor district notes, no blank walls or planes with buildings in corridor district. Did you want to address that?
The operation of his, where he would operate, would not be able to do all this stuff. He's very clear that he cannot operate this business. He's fine. He's here, we'd like to address that. He bought this site without this in place, without any knowledge of it. He rezoned this site without any knowledge. So he's kind of in the dark when he did all.
Understood. Respectfully, I would note that any municipal government is fluid with respect to the legislation they review and pass. And so I get what you're saying, but I don't. I understand what you're saying. Are there any street trees with respect to a landscape plan or overall plan with putting this in? Okay. Okay. Was I correct in seeing in the top side view that there is a sidewalk that is a 6-foot sidewalk that is a part of this? Okay. Is there any kind of lighting plan or lighting consideration with respect to this space?
The under, will be lit, there will be a site lighting plan that will be done.
And then, let's see here. Page 60 in the design review code talks about parking lots. Parking lots being oriented on the side and the rear, as Mr. Green mentioned. But you said that's not possible with this type of design. Desirable. Okay. Fair. Page 71. I didn't see this noted on the plan, so I wanted to call it out, just ask the question. Talks about rooftop mechanical units or other services and utilities located above grade shall be screened. Are there any rooftop units or anything like that that would be a part of this? With respect to parking, I don't know if I've seen where, and if it's a miss on my end, I'll call it out and own it, but where the building has been split between different uses and you have a retail parking requirement and storage in the back. Is that something that I've missed or is that normal?
What, I'm sorry, I'm not following you, Ben.
On the plans, you talk about the retail space requirements for parking being one for every 200 square feet of gross space, gross square footage, if I'm not mistaken.
That's not, that's sort of how we divide it up.
Right,
The retail in front, you know, one that's makes sense.
right.
Going at it.
And that's, and to the benefit of the plan, I would call it out because I think if I just applied the one for every 200 square foot for the total building, 91 spaces, I believe would be required. Whereas you're providing 63, and I think I said it, I'll say it again, I'll never shy away from fewer spaces. So I appreciate the consolidation in that respect. I didn't know if that was just normal practice or something that I had missed in previous applications. So I'm all in support of the fewer spaces. I think for me, this document, and I'm going to continue to reference this document because this document for me is the guiding document with how we make decisions. And the reason we're using it is because it's in place now before the application was submitted, regardless of the time frame of the planning and everything upstream, because we talked for what, 12 months
At least.
around the design review within public meetings on the within planning and zoning. So using this document, just to be clear, for me is my baseline. So with that in mind, there are several considerations in here with what is submitted and the design character that don't fit within what is being represented in the document itself, specifically how it fits within the character of its surroundings. The color, for me, I think works with the area that it's in, the neutral tones and things like that. But some of the massing of the building doesn't, when you take into consideration the newer approvals of buildings in that corridor itself and the application of the what's the corridor name? I'm blanking on the corridor name because it's a corridor district. All right, I'm just calling it corridor of the corridor district itself. So the comments that were made previously and specifically talking about the parking lot and having parking lot on the side and in the rear was for identifying this overlay corridor district for future development and how it factors in to the long-term plans of zoning and the considerations that we made when putting that document together. Anybody correct me if I'm wrong, but that's why we put that into the document itself. And so I feel like these two are incongruent in a lot of aspects that I've identified in my mind. I don't know how the rest of the board feels.
Anybody else have anything?
Yeah, really.
I was rotatable. Give them some time to give us a full board.
Yeah, I'm a little bit concerned about the roof. I mean, I know it's not a requirement, but all the buildings we've put up recently have had a hip roof, pitch roof. Little concerned, more than a little concerned about the windows in the front. I know you've got the clear story windows up high there, but I'm sure even with those we're short. So that's. Any idea where we're at now? Any idea where we're at now, though? If they're asking for 70, are we even at 10? 15?
The lot coverage I would call out too. I think it's a much higher lot coverage allowability, but we're only at 68%. I
They're
think.
gonna
for
have
this-
90.
Yeah, for
Yeah.
this parcel itself. So I think the lot coverage is very applicable and appreciate that consideration because green space obviously is something that we are very fond of. So in addition to the parking, appreciate that consideration with the overall design.
What's the current setback on that you have?
Where it is now.
Yeah. 95. Okay. Because I know what is GCC 2 right now? 40 or something like that. I know for the corridor district, it's what, 10 to 25? Is what we're going for on corridor.
The GCC two setback is right now is at 40 feet.
Yeah, that's what I thought it was 40. Then the corridor district we have is, I think was 10 to 25. What you're talking about.
I'd have to look on
Yeah.
that one.
Yeah. So I know I don't mind a further setback than 25. I know that we were going for a specific look in our corridor. I know we referenced North Cleveland Avenue in Westerville a lot. that area kind of up there is kind of what we were going for, something similar to that. We referenced a lot of other areas too. But I know that coming closer possibly to the road could free up some other space to allow you to work in the back. I mean, I would at least want to see, I understand that parking or how that lot is set up and to get a semi truck in there, I understand parking is going to be interesting. Semi trucks, you know, may or may not come in during the middle of the workday, especially with the current climate of our system and getting deliveries done. So I can sympathize with that, but like I said, we have a certain look that we're trying to get here, and having the parking towards the back or towards the side is what we're going for. So I think you could change the setback of that. And allow for more green space up front, an easier setback, and a little bit more room to work in the back. I know the windows was something that was mentioned. You know, we definitely want people to be able to walk by and see into buildings, things like that, be able to interact with the space. Also, I noticed the fence in the rear. I know there's an issue with the property line on that. What's the current plan for the fence? Have you guys addressed that? And any buffering around the property? So I know there's an issue with it for where it currently is, because it's on that property right now,
It
at least by a couple feet.
encroaches on Mr. Dyer's
Yeah.
property.
Yeah, I know that was one issue. As the fence currently sits-
Varies, but
as the fence sits right now, it's definitely not adequate for anything. I don't think you guys would want to see it how it sits right now. I don't think you'd want that in the back of your property. And that's something I was gonna mention later too, but I did notice it as I was looking through this. I'd like to see something a little bit, you know, more than a wooden privacy fence, as far as buffering down the backside and another side. As Ben mentioned, and we always mention, any trees you can get in there, the more the merrier, to add some buffering space and to kind of break that up, I think would be great. Like I said, I was in favor of at least tabling to allow some more time on this and allow us to have a full board on this tonight. I don't know if you guys are, if you would be in favor of that, to give you some more time to work.
The way I understand it, it's
I mean, from the outset, my main concern was, yeah, go ahead. And we can open up to public comment while you do that. Is there any public comment on this? The amount of
63.
spaces,
63.
63. So the parking's adequate right now, but it's right there.
Yeah.
That's
You table
right.
it Tonight, it'll come back.
Yeah. Yeah, so parking is right there. I think it could be moved around, switched around to get everybody what they need.
Garden center.
To the side, the garden center in the front.
The garden center out front would, I mean, if it's full of trees, that looks great, but if it's full of dirt and fence posts,
You
it
just
looks
move it
like-
Over here. In the
Just
back.
move it back.
move it to the rear.
Yeah, and just leave one spot for a semi. I built an Aldi with a tighter space than that, with a fence behind.
Dollar General's on the side. They just back straight in off 62, in a loading dock. Yeah, Aldi over in front of Lowe's is that way too.
They had a
Off
fence that was like-
Taylor,
it was like 14
off
feet.
16 over there.
It was 14 feet from the wall, the hip wall that went down to the fence.
If you're mixing parking and semi,
Semi can
it's
move in the
fine.
parking lot.
I would lose that front row parking.
Yeah. They're gonna
I
bring
want
it
to lose that front row
At
parking.
least one row. I mean, if you want to do the single row, if there's an adequate space to put most of the parking on the side, move the building up.
No parking for the whole, they have to meet the number of parking.
Jim, while we're waiting, this might be a question for you. The access to the lots behind there, I'll go through their driveway. Is there anything they need to do legally to? I know
We
it's a screwed up
originally-
situation.
He originally said he'd have to pave to his lot line.
That's, and then he just has to allow access. There's no easement or anything needed.
No, well, no,
I'm just saying.
he's moved the driveway over on his property. Otherwise, you can see the existing, part of the existing driveway.
Dashed in there.
Because we asked that question originally
Yeah.
about allowing access to the property in the rear, so it wasn't landlocked. And we're told at the time that it wasn't, there wasn't anything
The
additional.
driveway is really strange. There's maybe 12 feet belongs to the
I thought we were gonna look into that.
I think
property to the
it was recorded.
left when you come in,
Yeah.
It
and
wasn't
he
needed because it's a-
made his driveway. He's taking some of his property for it.
Have to let.
He owns all the
There's
drive.
no like, it's not generosity, it's requirement by the law. Which is also concerning with semis. It's a little concerning with semis. too.
Is that resident? That's residential.
Yeah, it's a house.
Might be around. That's what I'm saying. You need to
I think it is, I think it is around.
residential.
We want to release that for a few months. Oh, okay.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, and my only call out on this is just, reference our design guidelines and standards there in our current zoning, and that's what we're gonna base everything. So as long as you go through there and. Yeah. Okay. All right.
Thank you.
Well, I will make a
have to make a
motion.
motion to
Yeah,
table it.
we'll have to do the official part here. I'll make a motion to table.
And I'll second, but I just want to make the note that it is at the request of the applicant that we are tabling this tonight.
Yes.
Is that correct? Okay. Just want to make that apparent. So I'll second that table.
All right, we'll go for a roll call.
She's still right.
Ron Dane,
Yes.
Chairman Green,
Yes.
John Merriman.
Yes.
Ben Lee.
Yes,
All right, thank you.
thank you.
So we'll move on to other business.
Couple things, the 45,000 square foot expansion to the Apex building, which is now Cure Leaf. Is it Cure Leaf, Teresa?
I believe so, yeah.
Anyhow,
We're just doing-
that, they're going forward with that. So we just started working on that. We will probably hear the COA, although if you're going to do December 14th meeting, we'll decide. We need to decide. We had it on the schedule for January 25th.
It's pretty
Um,
straightforward. Be exactly the same as the current building.
Should be easy. Yeah, so just like Tech did.
Yeah, it's pretty straightforward. They're just going to match everything that's there. So there's a new business just is opening in Johnstown on 28 South Main. It's the guy already has the business, but he needs a storefront, and he's opening in a storefront rather than, I think he's a supplier, but he's going to have his own store now to sell his product. And it's called Uncle Polly's Dog Treats. So he's actually starting to set up inside the building.
28 South Main, you said?
Right at the crosswalk. When you come from
Okay.
Brick Street straight across, he goes right in.
Where Ben Franklin used to be.
Yeah, where Ben Franklin used to be.
Yeah.
Since we have the Dora, since we got to 5 additional liquor permits, that turned the process on to remodel the building for the liquor bar, the Ghost Rider Pub. They've already started working in there since they just found out this week.
Both floor, they're starting on the bottom and then going up.
Starting on the bottom, it appears to be, yes. And that's basically all I have other than deciding on the zoning meeting if we're going to do the 14th.
Might as well, yeah.
Yep. All right. No inspectors report tonight, but does anybody have anything else to call out in town?
When village council is next Tuesday, the 7th,
Pull up the
and
calendar.
the next scheduled meeting is the 14th, isn't it?
There's nothing scheduled for planning and zoning. If you're going to call a
There's no-
meeting,
No,
Is there
what-
something scheduled for council on the?
When's the
14th?
there
second?
is a 14th scheduled for council.
There you go.
So we
Oh.
can't do the
There's a presumption that it could be canceled, but it has not been canceled yet.
Yeah,
You want to go the 13th
or the.
or the 15th?
15th.
We're not doing anything the next 2 weeks after that.
I gotta do it Monday.
Yeah, Monday. be
Yeah,
good.
let's get it over with.
Start the week running.
Kick off the week right with zoning. All right.
so Monday, December 13th.
Yep.
At 6:30.
Monday the 13th.
It sounds like. So, because there's an events committee meeting at 5 o'clock on the 14th,
Mhm.
and then there's council currently scheduled. I think it'll stay,
Okay.
my opinion.
All right, so we'll go with that. Send an email out, of course. We'll make sure everybody knows and is well notified, even though we're here and,
So
make
we'll have, just to clarify, we'll have
we will have
the event center.
the event center and Ace Hardware. So that'll give them
Potentially.
time to,
And Apex, I mean.
and Apex,
Curly.
Cure Leaf. Okay,
Before
that'll
we-
give them time.
I'm
to
calling the
work.
project Apex, so because Andy Joseph still owns the building and everything's in Apex's name, I guess. So
Okay. All right.
Either
We'll
way.
Go ahead. We'll go ahead and make
Ben
a
does
motion.
something.
Oh,
I just want to thank Ron Dane.
Yeah.
Yeah.
My last meeting anymore.
yeah.
Huh?
Oh,
Oh,
my last meeting.
Got one
Yeah.
more, man.
He's
Well,
got one
yeah.
more.
I'm
Can't
gonna,
get
I'm gonna
out.
start now and thank Ron Dane, and I will finish that thank you on the 13th, then I guess. That's true. I wrote the note and I went by it. That's fine.
Yeah.
You're right.
well said.
Thanks, Ron.
Can we,
Thank you, Ron.
Can we make sure that the two applicants tonight know that the next meeting's on the 14th?
Yeah.
Me and Jesse.
And Jesse.
All right, we'll make a motion to adjourn.
So move.
All in favor?
Aye.
Hang on, Bailey, are we done recording?